So, when we talk about supply of labor, let's talk from an individual supplier's perspective. Now, एक individual supplier के साथ क्या होता है? Well, the worker basically who is supplying his hours. So with them, what happens is that they have basically two options. They can spend their time in. Either they can work or they can spend their time in leisure, right? That's the main two things that a worker we say can mainly do. Ab, what you have been acquainted with is a supply curve which looks like this. So, what you are aware of is that when the wage rate goes up, an individual worker is willing to give more hours, is willing to supply more hours, isn't it? That when wage goes up, the quantity supplied for labor goes up. When wage goes down, then quantity supplied for labor goes down. ठीक है? So this is something that we've already dealt with. अब होता ये है कि जब भी wages बढ़ रही होती हैं, there are two things that is happening. One is the income effect and the other is the substitution effect. So what are they? So whenever there is a rise in the wage rate, a person thinks to himself, okay, now that the wages have gone up, the price या फिर the opportunity cost of leisure time has risen. घर पे बैठना और चिल करना महंगा पड़ रहा है. So as a result, what the person does is that he starts to an individual substitute towards more work and gives up leisure time. When they do that, this is your substitution effect. And why is that happening? Because the worker feels sitting at home, the leisure time is costing me too much. I don't want to do that. So, as a result of this decision, what happens is that the quantity supplied of labor goes up as a result of this. ठीक है? तो यहाँ पे in my diagram, that's exactly what's happening. When the wages went up, the worker is choosing to work more hours. That means he feels that with the rising wages, the price of leisure, the opportunity cost of leisure time is going up, so he wants to work more hours. Substitution effect has a big role over here. Secondly, at the same time, what is also happening is that simultaneously, when the wages go up, the person is thinking that his income has gone up also. And when income goes up, we say that leisure is a normal good. And about normal good, what we have learned in O levels and AS is that when income goes up, your demand for normal goods go up, and when income goes down, your demand for normal goods go down. So here what is happening is, since leisure is a normal good, and with the rising wages, your incomes are going up, so you as a consumer now are thinking that, you know what, I can afford more leisure time. So as a result, the quantity of leisure time goes up. Now, obviously, if this is going up, what is going to happen to the quantity supplied of labor? The hours that their labor is willing to do? Well, it goes down. And it makes perfect sense that income going up, you want to spend more time chilling, and so obviously you're going to supply lesser hours. So, what this helps us to conclude is that substitution effect is positive because the quantity supplied for labor increases, and the income effect is negative. In fact, let me add this word so that in MCQs or anywhere you don't get confused even for a second. It's about always. Substitution effect is always positive. More quantity supplied will happen, and income effect will always be negative. Quantity supplied for labor will fall. So, in my diagram up here, what's really happening is that the substitution effect is winning over the income effect. Now remember, whenever wages goes up, you always have substitution and income effect fighting over each other. In our diagram over here, the winning party is basically the substitution effect. That brings us to the second type of supply curve, which we have already dealt with, is the backward bending supply curve. In this backward bending supply curve, what we said was happening is that when the wages was going up, the worker was substituting leisure hours for more work hours. So you had a more positive effect than negative. Why? Because the quantity is increasing. So we can say over here that substitution effect is greater than income effect. That's why there is more quantity supplied for labor. When you reach this point, at this point, what's going to happen is that substitution effect will become equals to the income effect. It's not going to let either increase or decrease happen. It's going to stop at this level. And after that, at higher wages above WO, the substitution effect is losing and the income effect is helping you reduce the number of hours that you want to work. Okay, so this is the backward bending supply curve. This is how it works. Wages बढ़ने से quantity supplied for labor will not always increase, as we saw in the case of the backward bending supply curve. अब जब हम इंडस्ट्री की सप्लाई की बात करते हैं, इंडस्ट्री का सप्लाई कर्व अपवर्ड स्लोपिंग है. ये कैसे आता है? इंडिविजुअल्स के सारे सप्लाई कर्व्स को हॉरिजॉन्टली ऐड कर दो तो यू विल सी एन अपवर्ड स्लोपिंग ट्रेंड ऑफ द सप्लाई कर्व. व्हाट इट सिंपली सेज इज दैट एक इंडस्ट्री का सप्लाई कर्व क्या कहता है कि हायर वेजेस विल अट्रैक्ट मोर वर्कर्स इनटू द इंडस्ट्री. सिंपल एज दैट. ओके, सो देयर आर सम डिटर्मिनेंट्स फॉर इट that can have an effect on the supply of labor. Number one, it's about the migration. What is the migration pattern in the country? Okay, so when we're talking about an overall industry ka supply, so obviously it's a country level issue. Now, migration patterns के अंदर we have to talk about हाँ जी immigration और इमिग्रेशन का क्या सीन है in the country. Now for country like Pakistan, हमारा सिचुएशन इस तरह का है. ई वाला इमिग्रेशन ज़्यादा है आई वाले इमिग्रेशन से. द वे आई रिमेंबर इट इज ई फॉर एक्सपोर्ट यानी मोर पीपल गोइंग आउट एंड आई फॉर इम्पोर्ट दैट मीन्स मोर पीपल कमिंग इन. ठीक हो गया. So, if the outflow is greater than the inflow, what's going to happen to the labor supply? Well, the supply for labor is going to go down. Okay, because more people are going in out than coming in. For America, Australia, Canada, for these developed economies, they have more people coming into their country than going out. So for them, the supply for labor actually goes up rather than going down. Number two reason that can have an effect is income tax. Income tax works in two ways. Suppose if income tax goes up, at one end, it's going to discourage workers, right? It's going to discourage them. Why? Because they're going to feel that it's not worth to work so much. And as a result, people will choose not to go to work. But on the other hand, unfortunately, people will not be able to afford as many goods and services because income tax से एक chunk निकल जा रहा है. Your disposable income is going down. Disposable income goes down, and so obviously your consumption capability goes down. So to compensate for this loss, for lost income, people will have no choice but to work more hours, and as a result the supply for labor can increase. Now this would depend on country, it could depend on type of people. Like in Pakistan, people are hardly able to make enough money to survive, and if in government imposes a tax, people will not work less. There is a possibility that there might be some people who would choose to steal and beg and stuff like that. But generally, what's going to happen is people will have to work more hours to compensate so that they can make enough money to cover that loss. All right. Benefits, when we talk about benefit, we're talking about state benefits like unemployment benefits and all. Okay. So, if we say if state benefits are, if states benefits like sick, disability, unemployment benefits are generous, that is going to make people less hardworking. Okay, so people would prefer to stay home, and as a result the supply of labor is going to go down. So we should, they say that कि कम से कम benefits दोगे तो the more people will have to end up going because they will have no other choice. On the other hand, you have trade unions. Trade unions is an organization of labor which usually works to increase the wages. They have other responsibilities also, but generally they act to increase the wage rates through negotiation and all of that. And when this happens, when wages goes up, simply the quantity supplied for labor increases. Okay, considering that the substitution effect will have a greater role than the income effect, obviously. Okay, this is the movement along the curve factor. In fact, out of all of them, this was a shift factor, this is a shift factor, this one is a shift factor, this is actually a movement along the curve wala factor, and social is also a shift factor. What is the social trend about? Well, the social trend is about, um, you know how we've had this discussion earlier in previous lectures also, that women acceptability. Now, for the Western economies, it's an already an acceptable thing. Now, back in the day, even in developed economies, they had a similar culture of men working and women taking care of things at home. but with certain changes. एक तो economical difficulties की वजह से women had to come to support the family. Then technology के आने की वजह से women were able to do the home chores a lot more faster, so that it saved time for them. Then ये child, all these जिसको क्या कहते हैं, daycares and all of these facilities opening up, that also allowed women to have freer time and come into the work environment. And then obviously the working conditions have improved over the period of time, so that has also made women to be more acceptable. Okay, it has nothing to do with feminism or anything. All of these factors collectively encouraged women to come into the job market, and so this led to the supply of labor to increase. We're going to talk about elasticity of supply for labor. I'm assuming that we have become quite proficient in our discussion about elasticity. Uh, so basically, supply curve is upward sloping, is what we've learned. Now, in that upward sloping, the supply curve can have this sort of shape versus an upward sloping with this kind of shape. The difference is clear about the steepness of the curve. In our first case, let's suppose this is the wage and this is the quantity, and when it rises, what we see is a humongous increase in the quantity supplied. That means if wages increases, quantity supplied can increase by a large amount, and we call this an elastic curve. PES is greater than 1. In the second case, when the wage goes up substantially, the increase in quantity supplied is hardly. That means it's not so easy to increase the supply, and we say this is a situation when the supply curve is inelastic. ठीक हो गया? Now, what causes these curves to be elastic or inelastic? What causes the increase in supply so easy versus so difficult when wages go up? So we're talking about here in which cases you will have PES for labor greater than 1. Elastic. Okay. Formula kya hai? PES is equals to percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in wages. That's our PES ka formula. Okay. In denominator we have wages here. Now we say supply can be elastic. That means wages बढ़ने से बहुत बड़ा increase आ सकता है. Number one, why? Because there is a high level of unemployment. If there is high level of unemployment, a small wage rate can increase many workers to come and be like, I want the नौकरी, मुझे काम करना है. So if unemployment is low, then supply becomes inelastic. When unemployment is high, supply becomes elastic. Secondly, how easy it is occupationally and geographically for a worker to move. So, for example, in European Union has over 20 countries, more than 20 countries. And with them, when they joined the European Union, they agreed that not only goods and services will move without any tariffs, even labor and capital can move. So, if a person cannot find work in Germany and there is work in, let's say, France, the worker can go easily and they can work over there. That is geographical mobility. At the same time, if a person in a country, if majority people know basic English, math, writing and stuff and communication, For them, a lot of kinds of occupation becomes easy for them to join and learn and start. Okay, that brings occupational mobility. So the more occupational and geographical mobility there is, more elastic the supply curve tends to be. At the same time, what's the situation with the training period? If training period is short, wages go up. I look at, okay, in that industry, there are higher wages. I'll quickly go do a small course, training. I'm skilled, equipped, and I can join that industry easily. Supply will be elastic, shorter time training time period. But if it's a highly skilled work, it takes longer time period. I cannot increase the supply so easily in that industry. It will take time. Number four is about the qualification required. If something does not require serious qualification, then the supply tends to be high. For example, अगर हम chartered accountancy में बोले, so to be like a chartered accountant, you need a proper ICAP degree over here. But if you are doing like a basic accountancy, then you can just do simply ACCA. ACCA takes lesser time and it's easier. Okay. So the supply curve for ACCA workers would be something like this. It's more elastic. For ICAP chartered accountants, it's like this. Why? Because the qualification requirement is much more tougher, it takes longer time period, etc. So the supply is not as elastic as it is in ACCA. And then lastly, how much time do I have? In the long run, we say industry के अंदर you can train more workers and you can easily increase the supply. You can easily increase the elasticity. But if I have longer time period, in the short time period, I cannot do that. It's not possible for me. All right. The questions are about